If we look back at Sega's history, 1991 was undoubtedly one of their most glorious years. Not only was the original Sonic released, but another loved Sega franchise also saw the light of day: Streets of Rage. Thanks to the polished beat-em-up gameplay and house-inspired soundtrack, it was another key title to attract an older demographic. Streets of Rage was also a big stepping stone for freelance composer Yuzo Koshiro. He revealed his interest in developing a full game to one of the managers at Sega. Strong personal connections were key in the industry, which was especially the case in Japan. Koshiro never developed a game before, but thanks to his success at Sega, they entrusted him with a very special project, an 8-bit port for their upcoming little game called Sonic the Hedgehog. Koshiro had already set up a small company called Ancient, which was co-founded by his mother, who would cover the business side, and his sister, Ayano Koshiro, who would take care of the visuals and game design. She had already worked with her brother on games like East 2 and ActRaiser. Together with a few contracted freelancers, Ancient delivered a stellar port of the Blue Hedgehog, clearly designed around the hardware limitations of the 8-bit consoles. Thanks to their success, they were soon entrusted with another upcoming Sega franchise, Streets of Rage. The original Streets of Rage was developed by Sega's in-house AM7 team, who were responsible for a slew of hits for the Mega Drive. The game became a massive hit, especially in the West, but Sega of Japan was hesitant to put their development resources on a sequel. It took the folks at Sega of America to point out the importance of a sequel. Ultimately, the decision was made to outsource development to Ancient, with some guidance of the original director. The Koshiro siblings, along with the small team at Ancient, were helped by a handful of contracted artists and programmers. Ayano played a pivotal role as art director and planner, but also acted as the go-to person for both Sega and the external artists. Pre-production for Streets of Rage 2 lasted a week. This important first step helped to outline the basic goals and get all noses in the same direction. It was apparent from the beginning that the team went all out in surpassing its predecessor. For starters, Sega agreed to put the game on a massive 16 megabit cartridge. This was not only 4 times larger than the original, but also made it one of the first Sega games to be put on such a large ROM. The extra memory resulted in more detailed and varied levels, as well as larger character sprites. The planning team made sure all ideas and gameplay mechanics were carefully documented on paper throughout development. This ranged from character and level designs to detailed movesets for each character. Memory maps gave insight regarding how much of the total memory could be devoted to each element. As is common in most creative projects, not all ideas ended up in the final game for a variety of reasons. For example, there were a lot of interactive stage elements planned, like a car crashing into the wall in the opening stage. The decision was made early on to drop Adam as a playable character and replace him with 2 more unique fighters, the bulky wrestler Max and the agile Skate. They were both designed to give the player a different experience, thereby adding replay value. Inspiration for the new character Skate came from browsing through trendy magazines. Ayano Koshiro would cut out interesting images and slap them onto a mood board. Streets of Rage 2 is literally filled with references to things that the development crew loved. The characters Soya and Bino, for example, were inspired by soybean candy. Another passion of the development crew was Street Fighter II. Like so many gamers around the world, they too were hooked and played it constantly on their own arcade machine inside their office. One of the freelancers jokingly asked himself if they were actually working at all. But their love for the game directly resulted in many interesting concepts for Streets of Rage 2. The relatively large moveset and the Versus mode are direct examples of Street Fighter's influence. Working with freelance designers made the art direction role of Ayano Koshiro even more important. It was her responsibility to make sure that all pixel art had the same consistent style and level of quality. The opening stage especially demonstrates a lot of skill and knowledge on how to light a scene. The pavement is a good example. With just a handful of different tiles, they were able to simulate reflections and the soft nighttime shadows. The subtle bluish overall tint in the foreground objects also helped to give the stage a nighttime atmosphere. On the technical side, the Mega Drive video chip uses 4 palettes, each with 16 colors to display all on-screen graphics. In most cases, the palettes were evenly split among sprite art and background art. The advantage of different palettes is that it allows for efficient enemy color variance. But you have to realize that all playable characters, enemies, items, and even weapons shared the same 2 palettes. A lot of thought had to be put into organizing them to make sure a palette swap worked for all enemies and didn't affect the player characters and items. One of the high points of the original game was certainly its soundtrack, bringing the latest club music to the gaming scene. With the sequel, Yuzo Koshiro continued this vision. In 1992, the Detroit-based electronic musical genre known as techno started to amass a large following. Freelance composer Motohiro Kawashima was a big fan of this upcoming genre. He was hired to work on games like Shinobi 2 for the Game Gear. Impressed by his work, Koshiro asked him to help compose music for Streets of Rage 2. Kawashima was a regular face at clubs like Space Lab Yellow, located a few blocks away from one of Tokyo's largest nightlife districts. The two composers would visit the establishments frequently to indulge themselves in the latest club music. Inspired by the beats, they would try to recreate it on the Mega Drive hardware. One of the key ingredients of early house music are the drums from the Roland TR-909 drum machine. It was a relatively affordable piece of kit, and therefore the ideal choice for many young house pioneers in the 80s. Koshiro recreated the percussion elements as faithfully as possible to give his music that instant authenticity. The Mega Drive is quite versatile when it comes to audio. The main audio chip inside the console is a Yamaha FM chip. FM synthesis was quite popular in 80s synthesizers and has its unique flavor, but was also notorious for its complexity. In all forms of digital audio synthesis, a pulse is generated by a component called an oscillator. By changing the pitch, timbre, and volume, you can replicate a variety of instruments. It was up to the skill of the programmer to create realistic instruments or interesting gritty sounds. The Yamaha chip also has one channel that could play back pre-recorded samples. In Streets of Rage 2, the kick and the snare were sampled, as they were harder to recreate with FM synthesis, and sampling the short drum recordings only took up a very acceptable amount of storage space. The chip has a total of 6 channels, basically meaning that 6 sounds could play simultaneously. It was a big step up from most 8-bit systems, but still no luxury. For example, the piano music playing during the bar scene already used up 3 channels. Add a bass and percussion and there's little left for anything else. Here's where the programmable sound generator comes in play. This straightforward audio chip generated iconic 8-bit bleeps for all Sega Master System games. The chip was included in the Mega Drive for backwards compatibility, but was also used by many composers to give their score an extra layer of substance. Just listen to the same bar music with the added PSG channels. Yuzo Koshiro composed the music on the PC-88. This Japanese home computer had a very similar audio setup as the Mega Drive. Together with a friend, he wrote his own sequencer and audio driver, which he shared with his fellow composer Motohiro Kawashima. There was a healthy rivalry between the two, as they always seemed to be trying to outdo each other. Kawashima was responsible for the more techno-style tunes like Expander. Koshiro still developed the bulk of the score and infused it with neo-soul. He also delivered the sound effects and the voices. The young team at Ancient was bursting with energy and inspiration, often dining together while discussing new ideas for their passion project. When one of the team members came up with a new idea, they would gather around a programmer and try to implement it in a rough form on the spot. This hands-on approach with a quick turnaround really helped the creative process, as concepts could be tested rather quickly. All the effort and long workdays aside, Streets of Rage 2 was not available until late 1992. Missing the holiday slot no doubt put some pressure on Ayano Koshiro, but she guarded the quality of the game and fought for more development time to really polish all aspects. Thanks to this mindset and the creative work environment, the game not only managed to meet expectations, it surpassed them. Streets of Rage 2 became a flagship title for Sega and was used to demonstrate their new Activator full-body controller. Ancient continued to work for Sega on the critically acclaimed Oasis series. But all their success aside, Ancient stayed a small and thus agile company, allowing them to quickly adapt in the ever-changing video game market. Not having the burden of running a huge company allowed Yuzo to still do what he likes best, composing awesome music.